A word that all major German airlines are going to change their flight rules, effective immediately, putting 2 crew members in the cockpit at all times. Now, former Army helicopter pilot Amber Smith says that is a start. But as I understand it, Amber, that's supposed to be the case, certainly domestically in the United States. But I've often seen one pilot leave the cockpit and one pilot remains. Are they just going to crack down on this?
Well, I think that the United States has been the global leader in terms of these safety precautions and security measures to ensure that the entire flight is safe for the entire aircrew and the passengers. So I think that it is very smart that those German carriers are going to switch to the U.S. standard of having 2 pilots or 2 personnel in the cockpit at all time. That is a start, and hopefully we'll see other global carriers around the world as well sort of follow suit and adopt some of those practices.
The problem is that we don't always adopt those practices or stick to them, because I've been on many a flight where the co-pilot, the captain, goes to the restroom. They usually shield the cockpit with the snack cart or whatever. But how will this change things if we really button this down?
Well, ultimately, it's up to the pilots. If one pilot goes out and, there are those procedures in place, but if they're not following them, then they're only good if they're being followed. So, there's also more security precautions. The pilot that is remaining in the cockpit is supposed to be on oxygen, too, but it's sort of like after a while when you've been flying and you sort of relax on the rules a little bit, you're only accountable to yourself for that time, then, anything could happen.
Yeah, you're right about that. I'm wondering, too, Amber, if you're getting any word here that, we'll get into this later in the show, whether there's a consistent training for pilots across the globe, or whether it's looser in some regions than other regions. Psychological tests are different in one area than they might be in another area.
Well, it is. It's not an international standard. It's nation dependent. What we see here in the U.S., just as we saw, you might not see in Germany or other places around the world. The U.S. has very high standards. That's why I mentioned that these other carriers should adopt what the U.S. follows, especially in terms of hiring practices. The co-pilot had only about 630 hours when the plane crashed. In the U.S., most people at a minimum, when they are hired for a major airline as a co-pilot, they're going to have almost 1,000 hours more than that, at a minimum 1,500, and some of them usually get hired double that. So if that 1,500 is still a minimum, that's a seasoned pilot, and they're going to know what they're doing. When you're still in that 600-hour level, that's not as much. That's not necessarily a seasoned pilot.
Amazing. Thank you, Amber, very, very much.
Thanks, Neil.
Well, all of this news coming just